Have you ever had one of those days when everything just seems to go wrong? You know, the kind where the universe feels like it's playing a cruel joke on you, testing your patience, and everything you touch turns into chaos? Well, what if I told you that for one woman, what started as the worst day of her life ended with an invitation to something that most people could only dream of: a private island, an exclusive world far beyond her wildest expectations? But before you think this is just another lucky break story, trust me when I say this is anything but ordinary. The twists in this story will leave you questioning everything you know about fate, opportunity, and what it really takes to change your life forever. Let me ask you something. Picture yourself in her shoes for a moment. You're at the grocery store, everything's fine, but then suddenly, you drop your groceries. They scatter across the sidewalk, and in that split second, you feel like the universe has just piled one more thing on your shoulders. You're already running late, already frustrated, and now this? But what happens next will make you wonder if life has a hidden agenda for you. What if that very moment, something as seemingly insignificant as dropping a bag of groceries, was the turning point of a lifetime? Now, I know what you're thinking. You're probably thinking this is just another random twist of fate. But I promise you, this story isn't about coincidence. This isn't about a random lucky encounter. It's about what happens when we least expect it, when we're at our lowest, and life throws us a lifeline we never saw coming. I'm here to tell you that something extraordinary happens when you're forced to stop and take a hard look at where you are, where you've been, and where you might be heading. And that's exactly where this story starts, right in the middle of that grocery store disaster. But let me tell you, this story isn't just about a private island, it's about everything that leads up to that invitation. It's about what she went through, the people she met along the way, and how one small moment of vulnerability opened the door to a world she could never have imagined. But there's so much more to this than just the invitation itself. As we dive into this journey, I want you to think about what you would do if you found yourself in her shoes. How would you react if you were given the chance to leave everything behind and step into an entirely new world, one that was carefully crafted and filled with secrets that even the most extravagant dreams couldn't capture? Would you take it? Or would you be too afraid of what lies beyond? This is where you need to pay close attention. I'm not going to give everything away right now. I want to keep you on the edge of your seat. Because you see, as simple as it may seem on the surface, this isn't just about a trip to an island. It's about choices. It's about fate. And it's about the unexpected people who come into your life, making you question what you really want out of your own story. By the end of this video, you'll understand why this seemingly small accident led to something far bigger than anyone could have predicted, and you'll never look at your own little accidents the same way again. But what happens when this woman receives the invitation? How does someone respond to something so surreal, so out of the blue, that it seems too good to be true? That's the question you're about to get answers to. Because while everything seems like it's falling apart in her life, the invitation to this island presents a mystery of its own. Who sent it? What does it mean? And more importantly, why her? As the days unfold, this woman starts to realize that her life, her very identity, could be turned upside down, just because of one unexpected moment of fate. The story is about to get deeper. And as you continue to watch, you'll start to see how this unexpected invitation is only the beginning. It's going to challenge everything she thought she knew about herself. The twists are coming, and they'll hit you when you least expect it. It's about facing fears, overcoming insecurities, and stepping into a world that's as beautiful as it is terrifying. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. I want you to sit with this for a second. Imagine getting that letter, that golden ticket to an adventure you never asked for but suddenly can't resist. Would you accept it? Would you let go of the familiar and dive headfirst into the unknown? I know I would want to know what happens next, and I'm sure you do too. So stick with me. Stay tuned. What comes next will have you questioning everything. Because sometimes, just when you think everything is falling apart, life has a strange way of putting things back together in a way you never could have imagined. And trust me, you won't want to miss the journey ahead. I'll be right here, walking you through each step of this crazy ride. The invitation. The private island. The secrets. And yes, the answer to the mystery. We're not even close to the end, so hold on tight. This story is about to get wild. Stay with me until the very end. You won't regret it. As the days passed following that seemingly insignificant grocery store incident, it became clear that this wasn't just some random twist of fate. The woman, let's call her Emma, wasn't someone who typically drew attention to herself. In fact, she'd always preferred to blend in, to stay under the radar. She had a modest life, a job at a local coffee shop, and a circle of friends who, while well-meaning, didn't exactly bring much excitement into her world. Lately, she'd been feeling more disconnected than usual, as if the universe was slowly nudging her into a place she couldn't quite understand. She wasn't unhappy, but she was restless, like she was waiting for something, though she wasn't sure what. The quiet humdrum of her daily routine was starting to feel like it was closing in on her. The kind of quiet that makes you question whether there's more out there, more to life, than the predictable patterns of work and home. And then, there it was, an invitation to a private island. At first, Emma thought it was a mistake, some kind of misdirected mail or a prank. Who would want her, a regular woman who spent her days serving lattes and sorting through grocery bags, to come to an exclusive, remote island? But there it was, in black and white, the invitation, sealed with a wax emblem she'd never seen before. It wasn't just an ordinary invitation, it was practically a command, telling her to pack a bag and prepare for a once-in-a-lifetime experience. The envelope felt like it was alive in her hands, as if the letter itself was pressing her toward the unknown. But why her? That was the question she kept circling around. What had happened in her life recently that would make her a candidate for such an unusual offer? A part of her, the logical part, wanted to dismiss it, brush it off as a joke. But the more she thought about it, the more she realized there was something about it that couldn't be ignored. Something about the timing, the suddenness of it all. It seemed like the universe had been drawing her into a web she didn't quite understand but somehow felt compelled to step into. As she sat there holding the letter, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that someone had been watching her. That thought sent a chill down her spine. Was she being stalked? Was someone out there orchestrating this entire scenario, pulling her strings from behind the scenes? Then there was her past, which, while quiet, wasn't exactly without its own set of strange encounters. Emma hadn't always been so unnoticed. Years ago, she had a much different life, a much different circle of friends. It was during that time that she had crossed paths with a man who had left an indelible mark on her life. A man named Jacob, who, despite his charming exterior, had a knack for making her feel like she was always on the edge of something big, something life-changing. Their relationship had been brief but intense, and Emma had always felt like he knew more than he let on, like he was involved in something much bigger than her. But after a falling out, Jacob disappeared from her life without a trace. His name had come up in conversations now and then, but she had long since buried that chapter of her life, convinced it was all just a fleeting memory. But when she thought back to him, she realized something strange. After he left, she began noticing odd things, small occurrences that didn't quite add up. Unexplained phone calls. Anonymous gifts left on her doorstep. And even now, as she stared at the invitation in her hands, she couldn't help but wonder if Jacob had something to do with it. But was he a potential ally, or was he playing her for something far more sinister? As Emma continued to grapple with the invitation, she couldn't help but think of the other strange coincidences that had begun to unfold in her life. The last few weeks had been full of random encounters with people she didn't recognize, people who seemed to know things about her, things she hadn't told anyone. A mysterious man at the coffee shop had left a tip with a note that simply read, "You're closer than you think." Another time, a woman who had once been a regular customer suddenly showed up in her life again, this time with an odd request. She asked Emma if she'd ever considered leaving her small town behind and starting fresh somewhere new. And then there was the cryptic message she'd received a few days ago. It was an email from an unknown address, just a string of random words that somehow seemed to resonate with Emma on a deep level. "The island is waiting. You can't run from this. It's already chosen." No signature, no explanation, just those haunting words. Was it a threat? A warning? Or was it some strange kind of invitation, like the one that had arrived in her mailbox? But here's where it gets even stranger. Emma began looking into the company behind the island invitation, and what she found raised more questions than answers. The company, Exilum Enterprises, had been around for decades, but there was almost nothing known about it. A web search turned up a few articles, but each one was oddly vague, often with links to other dead-end websites or obscure references to private ventures and luxury getaways. But the deeper she dug, the more she began to uncover whispers about people who had disappeared after being invited to similar exclusive retreats hosted by the company. No one had ever come back. It was as if they had vanished without a trace, as if the island held a power to swallow people whole. What did Exilum Enterprises want with her? Was she really just a lucky recipient, or was there something else at play here? Was this island some kind of elaborate trap? The more she thought about it, the more the pieces began to seem connected. Jacob's disappearance. The strange coincidences. The odd people showing up in her life. The unsettling messages. It felt like all of it was leading her somewhere, pulling her toward that very invitation, toward that very island. But the question remained, who was orchestrating this? Who was behind it all? Was she being manipulated, or was she truly about to step into a world that had been waiting for her all along? With each passing day, Emma felt the pull growing stronger. She knew she had to make a choice. But the deeper she dug into the mystery, the less certain she became. Could she trust anyone? Was this all just a game, one that would cost her more than she was willing to pay? And as she sat there, torn between the invitation in her hands and the nagging doubts in her mind, she couldn't shake the feeling that she was being watched by someone who knew exactly what she would do next. As Emma continued her investigation into Exilum Enterprises, the sense of unease only grew. She had dug deeper into the company's history, pulling up bits and pieces of information, each discovery only adding to the puzzle. But then, something strange happened. One evening, as she was reviewing some documents she had printed from a site that seemed to be a dead end just days before, a key piece of evidence, an old article that detailed the disappearance of previous invitees, vanished. The link she had clicked to download the file was suddenly dead, replaced by a simple error page not found. Emma tried everything she could think of to retrieve the file. She checked her computer's cache, searched the web for archived versions, even tried to contact the site's administration. Nothing. It was as if the article had never existed at all, as if the internet itself had decided to erase the last shred of tangible proof that could have connected her to the truth. Frustrated but not deterred, Emma took a step back. Maybe it was time to reach out to someone. She remembered an old acquaintance, someone she hadn't seen in years but who had once worked in high-end hospitality management, Lena. Lena was one of those people who always seemed to know the ins and outs of the upper echelons of society, the kind of person who had connections to people whose names you'd only ever hear in whispers. The kind of person who might know something about Exilum Enterprises, about the mysterious private island, about everything that seemed to be happening to Emma. Lena had been there for Emma during some of the more difficult times in her life, and though their friendship had faded, Emma figured she might be the key to uncovering something more. So, she reached out. The response she got was nothing like what she expected. Lena was cold, distant, even a little defensive. "You're digging into things that you shouldn't," Lena had said over the phone, her voice tight with an edge Emma hadn't heard in years. "Trust me when I say this, leave it alone. You don't want to know what you're getting into." The warning struck Emma like a slap in the face. It was odd, Lena had always been the adventurous type, the kind of person who was more likely to embrace the unknown than shy away from it. Yet, here she was, practically pleading with Emma to back off. It felt wrong. Why would Lena, someone who had once been so open and free, suddenly become so defensive, so protective of a situation Emma hadn't even fully unraveled yet? Was there something Lena knew that she wasn't telling her? But Emma wasn't about to be intimidated. She had always been the kind of person who had to know the truth, no matter the cost. She couldn't let Lena's warning stop her, not now. She pushed forward, determined to uncover whatever secrets were lurking behind this strange invitation. However, as the hours wore on, another obstacle appeared. One morning, just as she was about to leave for work, her apartment door was left slightly ajar. Nothing was missing, but the strange feeling of intrusion settled over her like a thick fog. Had she left it open by accident? Maybe. But she wasn't so sure. The more she thought about it, the more she wondered if someone had been inside her apartment, someone who was watching her every move. The thought sent a chill through her spine, but she refused to let fear drive her away from the truth. But things continued to spiral. Over the following days, she began noticing odd things happening around her. Unmarked envelopes appeared in her mailbox, filled with nothing but blank pages. The phone calls she'd once dismissed as harmless, strange hang-ups, silent calls seemed to increase, and sometimes, when she answered the phone, there would be just a faint rustling on the other end, like someone was listening in but never speaking. And then came the unsettling text message, "Stop digging. You don't know what you're about to uncover." There was no number attached, just the message. It was as though someone was orchestrating this, pulling the strings from the shadows, warning her not to continue her investigation into Exelum Enterprises and the island. Emma felt cornered, but she knew she couldn't stop now. Her curiosity, her drive to uncover the truth, was stronger than the fear that was starting to settle over her like a thick blanket. But something still didn't sit right. What was the deal with Exelum Enterprises? Why was it so intent on keeping her away? Could it be possible that they had some kind of hold over Lena? Had she been involved in something much darker than Emma realized? As the mystery deepened, Emma started piecing together fragments of her own past, things she hadn't thought about in years. It was then that a memory hit her, one that she couldn't ignore any longer. She remembered, with startling clarity, a conversation she had with Jacob years ago, just before he disappeared. He had spoken cryptically about a hidden door, a way out that most people never found. He had talked about Exelum Enterprises in passing, but not in a way that seemed relevant at the time. "They know when you're ready," he had said, his voice low, his eyes flicking around nervously. "They're always watching. When they come for you, you'll know. But by then, it's too late." Emma never understood what he meant until now. Was Jacob involved in this somehow? Had he been a part of Exelum Enterprises or something connected to it? Was the invitation to the island something she had been unknowingly walking toward her entire life? Or had it all been part of some twisted game orchestrated by forces she couldn't even begin to comprehend? Just when Emma thought she was getting closer to the truth, things took an even darker turn. One night, as she was preparing to head out to meet an informant she thought she could trust, she received an unexpected visitor at her door. It was a man, someone she didn't recognize. He was well dressed, in an expensive suit, and his eyes held a strange, unsettling calm. He didn't say much at first, just stood there watching her for what felt like an eternity. Finally, he spoke. "You've been looking into things you don't understand," he said, his voice smooth but edged with something cold. "And it's time you stopped. If you know what's good for you, you'll leave this alone before it's too late." With that, he turned and walked away, leaving Emma standing in the doorway, her heart racing. Who was he? What did he know? And why had he come to her now? She had been warned. But the question was, by whom? And why? The answers were slipping further away, just out of reach. The island was closer than ever, but with each new revelation, Emma was starting to wonder if uncovering the truth would come at a cost far greater than she had ever imagined. The eerie encounter with the stranger at her door left Emma shaken, but she wasn't ready to back down. She couldn't. Too many questions had already formed, too many threads tied to her life, her past, that needed to be unraveled. And as much as she tried to convince herself that it was just some random, twisted warning, she couldn't shake the feeling that it was far more personal than that. That night, lying in bed, she couldn't get the man's words out of her head. "If you know what's good for you, you'll leave this alone." But the truth was, she wasn't sure what was good for her anymore. Was it better to stop digging? Or was it too late to turn back, now that she was already in this deep? But as the days passed, it wasn't just Emma who found herself drawn into this web of secrecy and danger. Her best friend, MIA, someone Emma had known since high school, started noticing strange things as well. At first, it was subtle, an anonymous phone call that left a long pause on the other end, a mysterious package left at her doorstep with nothing but a single key inside. MIA had always been the pragmatic one, the voice of reason in their friendship, but even she couldn't deny the oddness of it all. When MIA came to Emma, asking if she had any idea about the package, something in Emma's gut told her that this was no coincidence. The timing felt too deliberate, too precise. The key was a puzzle piece, but what did it unlock? Was it connected to the invitation Emma had received? Was it somehow linked to Exelum Enterprises or the island? At first, Emma hesitated to share the details of her own investigation with MIA. She didn't want to drag her friend into this mess, but the truth was, MIA had already been sucked in, whether she realized it or not. And so, with hesitation, Emma revealed what she had uncovered: the invitation, the strange warnings, the mysterious man who had shown up at her door. Mia's face went pale as she listened, her calm demeanor cracking for the first time in weeks. She had known about Emma's quiet restlessness, had seen the weight of it on her friend's shoulders, but this was something else entirely. MIA wasn't the type to get involved in something so far out of her comfort zone. She was practical, grounded. But the more Emma spoke, the more she realized that MIA had been unknowingly tied to all of this, just as she had been. Emma thought back to their last conversation before all of this began, the one where MIA had mentioned a business trip she'd taken to an exclusive resort not far from the rumored location of FeltFrame Enterprises. It had seemed innocent enough at the time, just another trip she took for work. But now, Emma wondered, could MIA have crossed paths with the same people who were behind the invitation? Had she unknowingly become involved with the very forces that were manipulating Emma's life? The idea seemed far-fetched, but the more Emma thought about it, the more the pieces seemed to fit together. The next twist came when MIA revealed a chilling detail about her business trip. She had met a man there, someone who had been in charge of the resort and who had taken an interest in her, asking questions that MIA now thought were odd. The man's name was Robert, and as MIA recalled, there was something unsettling about his charm, a kind of magnetic pull that made her feel like she couldn't say no. At the time, MIA had brushed it off as just another person trying to make an impression, but now, hearing Emma's story, a cold realization set in. Robert had asked her for her contact information, saying he might be able to help her advance in her career. The offer was too good to ignore, especially at a time when MIA was feeling stuck in her job. She never followed up with him, but the more she thought about it, the more she felt like she had missed a red flag. What if Robert wasn't just interested in her career? What if he was part of something much darker, something tied to the island, to FeltFrame Enterprises, to everything Emma had been uncovering? As Emma and MIA sat together, trying to make sense of all these strange events, it became clear that they were both being pulled deeper into a world they couldn't understand. MIA was being targeted, just as Emma was. But who was behind it? Was it possible that Robert was connected to the man who had visited Emma, the one who had warned her to stop digging? Or was he another pawn in a larger, more sinister game? And then, just as they thought they might have finally uncovered a clue that would lead them to the truth, another piece of the puzzle slipped through their fingers. Emma had managed to get her hands on a list of people who had previously been invited to FeltFrame Enterprises' private retreats, hoping that it would give her some insight into who was orchestrating all of this. But when she opened the file, she found that it had been wiped clean, every name, every detail, erased, as though it had never existed. Someone had been watching her every move. Someone was closing in, tightening the grip around her. And with each new attempt to uncover the truth, it felt as though more doors were slamming shut. Now, with the stakes rising higher than ever, Emma was left with no choice but to go underground. She had no idea who she could trust anymore, not even MIA, despite their years of friendship. And that was the scariest part of all. The more she learned, the less she knew. She thought she had been moving closer to the answers, but now it felt like she was moving further away from them, as if the truth itself was being buried deeper and deeper with every step she took. But perhaps the most unsettling question was one Emma couldn't shake. If she really was getting closer to the truth, then why did it feel like everything she uncovered only led to more unanswered questions? Was the invitation to the island truly a chance to escape, or was it a trap, a lure to draw her into a game she couldn't win? The fear of the unknown pressed against her chest, but she refused to back down. She had to know. For MIA. For herself. And for whatever was lurking just out of sight, waiting to pull them both into the darkness. With everything on the line, Emma found herself standing at the edge of something vast and dangerous. The island was closer than ever, but the deeper she dug, the more she realized that the answers she sought might be even more terrifying than the mystery itself. And just when she thought she couldn't take it anymore, another message arrived, one that would push her closer to the edge than ever before. It simply read, "Don't trust anyone." The days following the anonymous message, "Don't trust anyone," felt like a slow descent into something far darker than Emma had ever anticipated. She tried to brush it off, tried to pretend that it was just another cryptic warning in a series of them, but each passing moment felt more oppressive, as though the walls around her were closing in. Every shadow seemed to move just out of the corner of her eye, every unfamiliar face she passed felt like someone was watching her. It wasn't just the eerie feeling of being followed, it was the certainty that she was being watched, that someone, somewhere, knew her every move. She found herself checking the locks on her apartment door every few minutes, peering out of the windows to see if anyone was lingering outside. The phone calls had escalated again. But this time, it wasn't a hang-up. It was a voice. A low, gravelly voice that whispered her name, then fell silent. Each time, her heart would pound in her chest, and a cold sweat would coat her skin. It was a Tuesday evening when everything shifted from strange to terrifying. Emma had gone to her usual coffee shop, the one she worked at and frequented after hours to clear her head, hoping the warm atmosphere would offer some comfort amidst the chaos. The barista behind the counter greeted her, as usual, with a smile, but Emma couldn't shake the unease gnawing at her. As she ordered her drink, she noticed a man sitting at a corner table, watching her intently. He wasn't the kind of person she would normally remember, just an older guy, probably in his 50s, with sharp features and an air of quiet authority. But there was something about his gaze that unsettled her, something calculating in the way he watched her every move. It wasn't until she walked to the counter to pick up her drink that she realized the man was following her, his eyes never leaving her face. The realization hit her like a thunderclap. This wasn't paranoia. She was being followed. And it wasn't just some random person, it was someone who had been tracking her, someone who knew exactly who she was and where to find her. The thought made her skin crawl, but she tried to stay calm, to pretend like nothing was out of the ordinary. As she left the coffee shop, she noticed that the man stood up shortly after her and began walking in the same direction. She didn't dare look back. Instead, she hurried down the street, her heart hammering in her chest, her mind racing with panic. She didn't know who he was or what he wanted, but she had no doubt that he was connected to everything that had been happening to her, the strange warnings, the cryptic messages, the disappearance of the evidence she had been collecting. But the worst part was that she wasn't alone. MIA had been getting similar threats, similar strange encounters, though she hadn't realized the severity of the situation until now. Emma had tried to protect her from it, kept the truth from her as long as she could, but the truth was undeniable. Whatever was happening to Emma was happening to MIA, too. That night, MIA called her. She sounded frantic, her voice trembling, something Emma had never heard before. "Emma, I think they've taken him," MIA said, barely above a whisper. "Taken who? What are you talking about?" Emma's breath caught in her throat. "MIA, she continued, her voice shaking, "Robert. The man I met on the business trip. I think they've taken him." Emma froze, her hand clutching the phone so hard her knuckles turned white. Taken him? Emma had mentioned Robert before, the man from the resort who had seemed so interested in her career, but now Emma realized there was more to it. Robert wasn't just a random connection, he had been tied to the very network that had been following Emma. The pieces were starting to align in a way that terrified her. "What do you mean, taken?" Emma asked, her voice almost a whisper, too afraid to say it aloud. "I don't know," Mia's voice wavered. He's gone. I tried calling him, and there was no answer. His apartment's empty. I went there, and the locks, they were changed. Someone took him, Emma. I'm scared. What if we're next?" The panic in Mia's voice was the last thing Emma could bear to hear. She knew then that this wasn't just a game anymore. This wasn't some cryptic puzzle meant to keep her up at night. Someone was playing for keeps, and MIA was right. They were in danger. They weren't just being followed, they were being hunted. Emma's mind raced as she tried to make sense of it all. She had to act fast. She couldn't waste time trying to figure out who they were, what their endgame was. She had to get MIA out of there. But as she turned to head toward her car, she felt the unmistakable weight of eyes on her again. She wasn't alone. The man from the coffee shop had appeared behind her, close enough now that she could feel his presence, like a shadow pressing down on her. But before she could react, her phone buzzed in her pocket. It was a message from an unknown number. The text simply read, "Leave now, or she's next." Emma's blood ran cold. They weren't playing around anymore. Whoever had been watching her was now threatening the one person she couldn't afford to lose. The one person who could tie her to everything that had been happening. MIA. Emma felt her heart pounding in her chest as she spun on her heels, ready to confront the man behind her, but he was gone. Like a ghost, he had vanished into the crowd, leaving Emma alone and terrified in the middle of the street. But the worst part? She didn't know who to trust anymore. Not even MIA, not now that she realized the extent of what was happening. The very foundation of their friendship felt like it was being ripped apart by some invisible force that neither of them understood. The tension was unbearable, suffocating. Emma felt like she was drowning, trapped in a web that was getting tighter with every step she took. Each new clue only led her deeper into confusion. Was Robert just another pawn in a bigger game? Or was he involved in something far darker? What did they want with her? And why was MIA, someone so close to her, now dragged into this? Emma had never felt more isolated, more helpless. She had come so far, only to find herself spiraling further into the unknown. The answers were just beyond reach, like a mirage that disappeared the closer she got to it. And now, as the night stretched on and the shadow of danger loomed over her, one question lingered in her mind, pressing against her consciousness like a heavy weight. How far would they go to silence the truth? The tension that had been building up to unbearable levels finally snapped one cold evening. Emma had barely managed to catch her breath after the chilling text message warning her that MIA was next. The night had become a blur of fear and panic, her mind reeling from the thought that someone was playing with her, toying with her life. She had to act. She had to get MIA out of harm's way. Every instinct in her screamed that it was too dangerous to wait any longer, that they were in too deep, but what she didn't realize was that waiting was exactly what she had been doing all along, waiting to see the true face of everything that had been happening. The truth had been in front of her the entire time, hidden in plain sight, she had just been too blind to see it. It all started with a phone call. Emma had barely settled into bed, trying to silence the racing thoughts that had consumed her, when her phone rang. She hesitated, expecting to hear Mia's voice, frantic and filled with dread. But it wasn't MIA. It wasn't even a stranger. The voice on the other end was calm, cold, almost too collected, and something about it sent an icy shiver down Emma's spine. "We need to talk," the voice said, and Emma's stomach dropped. Who is this?" she asked, her voice shaking. She had learned by now that it was better to be cautious, to not give too much away, but she could already feel her heartbeat rising in her chest, the fear creeping back. "You don't recognize me, do you?" the voice continued. "Let's just say I'm someone you should have paid more attention to." The words hit her like a punch to the gut. She couldn't place it at first, but then it clicked, the voice, the tone, the phrasing. It was Robert. The man MIA had met on her business trip. The same man who had seemed harmless, the one who had appeared to be nothing more than a random figure in the web of mystery surrounding Emma. But hearing his voice now, cold and calculated, made her realize how little she actually knew. And as Robert spoke again, the pieces she had missed in all of her frantic searching began to fall into place. "You've been looking in the wrong places, Emma," Robert said, his voice smooth, almost mocking. "You've been looking for the wrong answers, digging in all the wrong places." "I don't understand," Emma whispered, the dread growing thicker by the second. "What do you want from me?" "What I want," Robert replied, his voice suddenly hardening, "is for you to stop pretending like you don't know what's really going on. You've always been a part of this. Whether you want to admit it or not." Her mind went blank. What? She wasn't part of anything. She had been trying to uncover the truth, trying to understand what was happening to her and MIA, trying to figure out why they had been targeted by Exelum Enterprises. But she was no one special, just an ordinary woman caught up in a web of lies and manipulation. Or so she thought. "Listen carefully," Robert said, his voice low and almost soothing. "I know you've been digging. But the truth is, you've been digging around the wrong person, the wrong source. The one you should really be looking at is MIA." A rush of confusion flooded Emma's mind. MIA? Her best friend, the one person she trusted above all others? What was Robert saying? She could barely process the words. The idea was too impossible, too far-fetched. But as Robert continued, something in her gut began to twist uncomfortably. "Mia's always known more than you think," Robert said. "She's been with us from the beginning. She's the one who's been feeding you breadcrumbs, watching you dig deeper, all while keeping her hands clean. She's been playing you, Emma, making you do all the dirty work while she sat back and watched." "No," Emma breathed, shaking her head. "It can't be true." But as she processed the words, she realized the fragments of the story that had never quite added up. Mia had been too distant lately, too out of the loop when Emma had needed her most. She had never seemed that worried about the mysterious invitations, the threats that had been escalating. The more Emma thought about it, the more certain she became that there had been moments where Mia had known more than she let on. She had dismissed them as coincidences, but now, everything was different. Mia had always been the link, the common thread in this entire mess. "I'm not going to let you destroy everything," Robert's voice cut through her thoughts, his tone now dark and final. "If you want to save your friend, you'll do exactly as you're told. Come alone to the island. Mia's already waiting for you." Emma felt her breath catch in her throat. She wanted to scream, to demand answers, to fight back, but she knew she couldn't. Everything she thought she knew had been turned upside down in an instant. Mia, her best friend, had been playing her the entire time. The island. It was never a place of escape. It was a trap. Mia had known. The phone line went silent, and Emma was left there, trembling, as the weight of the truth crushed her chest. She had been a pawn in a game she didn't understand, manipulated into digging up information that would only lead her into deeper danger. Her trust in Mia, the one person she had thought she could rely on, had been her undoing. Her world felt like it was falling apart. How could she have been so blind? Was it all part of some larger plan, one that Mia had been orchestrating from the start? Was she being set up, or was Mia herself just another player in this twisted game? As the realization sank in, Emma knew one thing for certain: she was no longer in control. Whoever was behind this, Robert, Mia, Exilum Enterprises, they had all the power. And the island, that seemingly innocent escape, was no longer the answer she had hoped it would be. It was the beginning of something much worse. The only question left was whether she could survive long enough to find out what that something really was. But as she stood there, the phone still clutched in her trembling hand, one thought burned through her mind: was Mia already on the island? And if so, was she there to help Emma, or to finally bring her to her knees? The next few hours felt like a blur of dread, each passing second dragging Emma deeper into a pit she couldn't escape. She sat in her apartment, her mind racing with the realization that everything she thought she knew had been a lie. Mia, the one person she trusted above all others, had been hiding something monumental from her, something that had led them both down this dangerous path. She could feel the weight of Robert's words pressing down on her chest, suffocating her thoughts. Mia had been involved from the beginning, orchestrating things behind the scenes, manipulating Emma into doing the very thing that would eventually pull them both into a deadly game. Emma was left standing at the crossroads of an impossible choice: confront Mia and demand answers, or continue playing along, hoping there was still a way out. But neither option felt safe, and neither felt right. The phone call from Robert had shaken her to her core, but it wasn't the words themselves that terrified her the most. It was the way he had ended it, the cold finality in his voice as he told her Mia was already on the island, waiting for her. Mia was waiting for her. It was as if everything had been leading to this moment, this brutal collision of betrayal and survival. Emma couldn't ignore it any longer. She had to face Mia, to confront her about everything. But how could she even begin to trust someone who had so clearly deceived her? She sat frozen, staring at her phone screen. The message from Robert still burned into her memory. "If you want to save your friend, you'll do exactly as you're told. Come alone to the island. Mia's already waiting for you." The words taunted her, promising something sinister. The idea of going to the island felt like walking into the mouth of a lion, but what choice did she have? What would happen if she stayed? What if Mia was waiting there, not to help her, but to finish what had been set in motion long ago? Emma's phone buzzed again, breaking her from her spiraling thoughts. It was Mia, of course, her name flashing on the screen, and for a split second, Emma considered ignoring it. She didn't know if she could even bring herself to talk to her. The emotions swirling within her were overwhelming, the betrayal feeling fresh with every passing second. But then, almost against her will, she swiped to answer. "MIA," Emma said, her voice sounding more distant than she felt. "What's going on?" There was a long pause on the other end of the line before Mia's voice came through, shaky but still trying to sound calm. "Emma. This is harder than I thought it would be." Emma's heart pounded in her chest. Harder than what? Mia's words seemed to confirm everything Robert had said, and now she could hear the cracks in her friend's voice, the weight of the truth starting to break through. "I don't know what's going on anymore," Mia continued, her voice cracking. "I never wanted you to get hurt. I never meant for things to go this far. But you have to understand, I couldn't stop it." "Stop what?" Emma asked, a surge of emotion flooding through her. "What are you talking about, Mia? I've been dragged into this nightmare, our nightmare, and you've been behind it the whole time. Why? Why didn't you tell me?" "I couldn't," Mia replied quickly, almost pleading. "It's too dangerous, Emma. I wanted to protect you. I didn't know how to tell you the truth without risking everything. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry." The apology stung, but it wasn't enough. Not when Emma realized just how much Mia had kept from her. How much everyone had been keeping from her. There was no more pretending, no more running from the truth. Mia had been involved in this from the very start. Emma's thoughts spun wildly. Was Mia being controlled? Or had she been a willing participant all along? Had everything they'd been through, all the moments of trust and friendship, been nothing more than a carefully crafted lie? "I'm going to the island," Emma said, her voice suddenly firm, even though every part of her wanted to run in the opposite direction. "I have to know what's going on. I have to know if you're with me, or if you're against me." Mia didn't respond for a long moment, the silence hanging heavy between them. Emma could hear Mia's breath, shallow and strained, as though she was trying to figure out how to save both herself and Emma from the chaos they were caught in. "Don't go," Mia finally whispered. "Please, Emma, don't go. I'm trying to fix this, but I need you to trust me. If you go to the island now, everything will fall apart. It's not what it seems. It's a trap, and they'll never let you leave." Emma's breath caught in her throat, a new kind of fear rising inside her. A trap. The words echoed in her mind, but it wasn't just the island that was the trap. Mia was the trap. Her betrayal had been too much to ignore, too deep to overlook. How could she trust someone who had been lying to her, keeping her in the dark for so long? "I don't know who to trust anymore, Mia," Emma said, her voice tight with emotion. "I thought you were my best friend. I thought we could handle anything together. But now I see that you've been hiding everything from me. You knew all along what was going on. And you didn't tell me. You kept me in the dark, thinking we were in this together, while you were playing a different game." "No, Emma," Mia pleaded. "It's not like that. I never meant to hurt you. I wanted to protect you from the truth because it's too dangerous. But now it's too late. You have to trust me. Please. If you go there, it's all over. For both of us. They will never let us leave." Emma's heart raced as the weight of the decision before her became all too clear. She had to make a choice, and it wasn't going to be an easy one. Trusting Mia again felt impossible, yet she couldn't shake the feeling that Mia was still trying to protect her, even now. Was this all part of some larger plan? Or was Mia really trying to save her, trying to keep her from walking into the trap that had been set for them both? "Please," Mia whispered again. "Don't go. If you go there, you'll be walking straight into their hands. They will use you. They will use us." Emma stood, pacing around the room, her mind torn between the two conflicting voices in her head, the one urging her to run and never look back, and the other desperately wanting to believe that Mia was still on her side. But then the reality hit. Mia had already made her choice. The island. The people behind this twisted game. They weren't waiting anymore. Robert's words were clear, Mia was already there. And somehow, Emma knew that this was the moment of no return. "I have to go," Emma said, her voice shaking, but firm. "I have to see for myself. I have to know the truth. Once and for all." And with that, she hung up the phone, her chest tight with fear, the weight of the decision crashing down on her. There was no turning back. She had chosen the truth. But in doing so, she had just sealed her fate. As Emma stood at the edge of the island, the sea breeze whipping through her hair, the weight of her choices crashed down on her in an overwhelming tide. She had made it. She had come this far. But what was waiting for her here? The island was eerily silent, its sprawling mansion looming in the distance like a dark shadow against the horizon. The message from Robert echoed in her mind, repeating over and over like a broken record, "Mia's already waiting for you." Her stomach churned. If MIA had been playing her from the beginning, if everything she had trusted was a lie, then what did that make Emma? Was she just another pawn, another cog in some massive, sinister machine that had been operating behind the scenes, pulling the strings on her life for months? The more she thought about it, the more it became clear that this wasn't just about her or MIA anymore. The scope of the conspiracy had expanded far beyond anything she could have imagined. The people pulling the strings were everywhere, watching her, controlling the flow of information, weaving a web of deception that reached into the darkest corners of her life. As she approached the entrance to the mansion, her breath coming in short, shallow gasps, Emma couldn't help but feel the gravity of what was unfolding. Her mind raced through the countless questions that had yet to be answered. Who were these people? What did they want from her? And why had she and MIA been chosen? Every answer only seemed to lead to more confusion, more uncertainty. The door creaked open in front of her, a slow, ominous sound that set her nerves on edge. As she stepped inside, her senses heightened, every shadow seeming to move with a life of its own. The mansion's opulent interior did nothing to comfort her. Instead, it felt like a mausoleum, its marble floors and expensive artwork now more sinister than beautiful. The walls closed in around her, the weight of what she was about to face pressing harder with each step. It wasn't long before she heard the footsteps behind her. A figure emerged from the darkness of a hallway, their silhouette tall and imposing. Her heart stopped. "MIA. MIA," Emma whispered, her voice trembling with a mixture of relief and apprehension. She had expected this moment, but nothing could have prepared her for the person who stood before her now. Mia's eyes, once warm and familiar, were cold and distant, as though the woman she had known was now a stranger. "You shouldn't have come, Emma," MIA said, her voice barely above a whisper. "This is bigger than you think. Bigger than both of us." "What do you mean, bigger?" Emma asked, her voice rising with panic. "MIA, what the hell is going on? Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me?" MIA took a step forward, her face etched with regret. "I never wanted you to get hurt. But you've already seen too much. There's no going back now. They've already got you in their sights." Before Emma could respond, the sound of doors opening echoed through the mansion. Another figure emerged, someone she hadn't expected, someone she had never even considered as a possibility. Robert. He stepped into the room, his expression unreadable, his eyes betraying nothing of the threat that Emma could sense hanging in the air. "Emma," Robert said, his voice cold and almost mocking. "I was wondering when you'd finally show up." "Robert," Emma said through clenched teeth, her body stiffening. "What the hell is going on here? All this time, you've been behind it, haven't you? You and MIA, you've been playing me. Using me." Mia's eyes shifted uneasily. She wanted to speak, but Robert cut her off before she could get a word out. "You've got it all wrong, Emma," Robert said, his tone smooth and calculated. "MIA wasn't the one using you. We both were. We've been keeping you in the dark for a reason, because you were too important to let go." Emma's heart pounded in her chest as the reality of his words sank in. Important to let go. Her mind raced, trying to piece together the tangled mess of lies, deception, and manipulation that had become her life. And then it hit her, they needed her. Not for her skills, not for anything that made her special. But because Emma was the one who could unravel it all. She had been the key all along. "MIA," Emma said, her voice trembling with a mix of betrayal and confusion. "Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you warn me?" "I couldn't," MIA whispered, her voice breaking. "I had no choice. You were always meant to be a part of this. They've been watching you. Watching both of us. It's too dangerous, Emma. I couldn't protect you anymore. The room seemed to close in on her, the walls tightening around her with every word. Emma could feel the tension building, the pressure of the truth threatening to crush her. She wasn't just caught in a conspiracy anymore, she was the center of it. "What is this?" Emma demanded, her voice rising as the weight of the situation pressed on her chest. "What do you want from me?" Robert's eyes gleamed, a faint smile tugging at his lips. "What we want, Emma, is simple. We want you to join us. You're the missing piece. Without you, this entire operation falls apart." The words hit her like a slap. Emma took a step back, her mind reeling. Join them? The very people who had made her life a living hell? The people who had manipulated her, used her, and lied to her at every turn? She could feel the fire of anger igniting inside her. She had been nothing more than a pawn in their twisted game, and now they expected her to help them? "No," Emma said, shaking her head. "I'll never join you." Robert's smile faded, replaced by something far colder. "You don't have a choice, Emma. This has gone too far. You've seen too much. You know too much. You're already in this deeper than you realize. If you walk away now, you'll never be safe. You'll be hunted for the rest of your life." Emma's heart raced as the full scope of their control became painfully clear. This wasn't just about her. This wasn't just about MIA. This was about a network, a system that reached far beyond their comprehension, and Emma was at the center of it all. "You don't understand," MIA said, her voice barely audible. "They'll come for us. If we don't give them what they want, everything we know, everything we are, will be destroyed." The urgency in Mia's voice cut through Emma's anger, and for a moment, she hesitated. But then the realization hit her hard. There was no escape. No matter what decision she made, she was already trapped. This had been set in motion long before she'd even realized it. The people pulling the strings, Robert, MIA, Exilum Enterprises, had already ensured that there would be no turning back. The question now wasn't whether she could escape. The question was whether she could survive long enough to expose them all. The tension in the room was unbearable, as if the very air had thickened with the weight of betrayal and desperation. Emma could feel her heart racing, each beat a constant reminder that she was no longer just a victim in this twisted game. She was standing at the crossroads of her life, with everything she thought she knew crumbling around her. The truth was finally within her grasp, but the cost of uncovering it was far greater than she could have imagined. Robert and MIA stood just a few feet away, their faces unreadable, their motives more sinister than ever. Emma's mind was reeling, each new revelation shattering the illusion of safety she had clung to for so long. But one thing was crystal clear now, there was no escaping this. "Not anymore. You think you can just walk away from all of this?" Robert's voice was calm, but there was an edge to it that sent a chill down Emma's spine. He was confident, too confident. As if everything had already been decided, as if the pieces of this game had already fallen into place and she was simply a bystander. But Emma wasn't a bystander. She wasn't going to let them control her fate any longer. "I'm not walking away," she said, her voice steady despite the storm brewing inside her. "I'm going to end this. Right now." MIA stepped forward, her eyes filled with a mixture of guilt and fear, but Emma could see something else there too, a desperate desire to make things right, to save whatever piece of their friendship had survived the wreckage of their lies. "Emma, please, you don't understand. It's too dangerous. Robert's right. They'll come for us if we don't play their game. That's what they want," Emma snapped. "To make us think we're helpless. To make us believe we have no choice but to fall in line." Mia's expression faltered, as if the weight of Emma's words hit her harder than she expected. "It's not that simple, Emma. You don't know the power they have." "I know more than you think," Emma replied, her voice rising in defiance. "And I'm not afraid of them." She took a step forward, feeling the intensity of the moment building, the final confrontation drawing near. This was it. The moment when everything came to a head, when the lies would be stripped away, and the truth would finally emerge, no matter the cost. As she moved, her mind flashed back to the moments that had led her here, the phone calls, the cryptic messages, the strange events that had felt like fragments of a puzzle she could never quite put together. But now, in the face of Robert and MIA, it all clicked. Every misdirection, every twist, every hidden truth began to align in her mind, and she realized just how deep this conspiracy ran. It wasn't just a game. It wasn't just about her. This was about power, about controlling information, manipulating the masses, and bending people to their will. "Robert," she said, her voice low but firm. "I know about Exilum Enterprises. I know about your little operation. This isn't about me or MIA. This is about them. The people who are pulling the strings." For the first time, Robert's expression cracked. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, but it was quickly masked by a smirk. "You think you're the first person to figure it out," he sneered. "This isn't just about Exilum, Emma. This is bigger than that. Bigger than all of us. There are people in positions of power, people who control everything you see and hear. And now, you're a part of it. Whether you like it or not." Emma's blood ran cold as the magnitude of his words sank in. This was bigger than Exilum. Bigger than Robert and MIA. There were forces at play here, people she couldn't even begin to comprehend, who were orchestrating a massive, global manipulation, using her as a pawn in their game of control. And now they wanted her to help them finish it. But Emma wasn't about to play along. She wasn't about to let these monsters dictate her life any longer. "You're wrong," Emma said, her voice unwavering. "I'm not a part of your plan. I never will be." Without another word, Emma reached into her bag, pulling out the small flash drive she had stolen from Robert's office earlier that day. The one that contained everything, the evidence, the files, the names of those involved in the conspiracy that had taken over her life. Robert's eyes narrowed as he saw the flash drive in her hand. "You think that changes anything? You think that proves anything?" Emma didn't respond. She simply pressed the button on her phone and watched as the screen lit up, connecting to the device that would broadcast the files to the world. Mia's eyes widened in horror. "Emma, no. You don't understand." But it was too late. The files began to upload, a flood of information pouring into the system, unlocking secrets that had been buried for years. As the data transferred, Emma could see the realization dawning in Robert's eyes. He had underestimated her, underestimated the one thing that they had all failed to control, her determination. For a moment, there was silence, a deep, suffocating silence that hung in the air as the weight of their actions settled over them. And then, with a snap, everything changed. The lights in the mansion flickered, and Emma's phone buzzed with an incoming message. She didn't need to read it to know what it was a warning. A loud bang echoed through the building, followed by the screeching sound of metal scraping against stone. Emma turned toward the window, her heart sinking as she saw the dark shapes of black SUVs pulling up to the mansion, the men inside dressed in black, their faces obscured. The people behind this operation weren't just watching anymore, they were here, and they weren't going to let anyone stand in their way. The final twist hit Emma like a punch to the gut. She wasn't just up against Robert and MIA. She wasn't just fighting Exilum Enterprises. The people pulling the strings were already here, and they weren't going to let her expose them. Robert's smirk had returned, but it wasn't the same. This time, there was no mockery in it. There was fear. "You've made a terrible mistake," Robert said, his voice low and cold. "You think you're a hero, Emma? You think you can take down a system that's been in place for decades? You're nothing but a pawn, just like the rest of us." But Emma wasn't listening anymore. She didn't care about Robert's words, or about the people outside, or about the consequences of what she had just done. All she cared about was that she had taken the first step, the first real step, in exposing the truth. As the sound of approaching footsteps grew louder, Emma turned to face her fate, a fierce fire burning in her chest. She didn't know how this would end, or if she would survive the storm that was about to hit. But she knew one thing for certain: she was done being a pawn. The game was over. And now, the real battle was about to begin. The chaos outside seemed endless, the pounding footsteps, the frantic shouts, the screech of tires against the gravel as the black SUVs neared. But inside the mansion, time felt as if it had slowed to a crawl. Emma's heart raced, not with fear, but with the realization that she had just set a chain of events in motion that could never be undone. She had exposed them, the people behind the veil, the shadowy figures that had controlled everything in her life. The flash drive was still in her hand, now a symbol of both her defiance and her courage. But as the seconds ticked by, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that what she had uncovered was just the tip of the iceberg. The weight of it all settled heavily in her chest. She turned to look at MIA, who was standing at the edge of the room, her eyes wide with fear, but also something else, regret, maybe, or guilt. But Emma saw the truth now. MIA wasn't the villain in this story. She wasn't the mastermind. MIA had been just as trapped as she had been, pulled into the same web of deceit and manipulation. And as much as Emma wanted to be angry, to scream, to demand answers for the betrayals, she knew deep down that MIA had been a victim too. They had both been victims, caught in the same system, manipulated by the same force. Emma, Mia's voice broke the silence, raw with emotion. I never wanted you to get hurt. I tried to protect you, but I couldn't. Emma didn't know what to say. She had so many questions, so much anger bubbling inside her, but in this moment, she saw the vulnerability in MIA that mirrored her own. It wasn't a time for blame, it was a time for understanding, even if they could never fully comprehend the forces that had played with their lives like pawns on a chessboard. The sound of the door opening behind them made both of them jump, but Emma didn't need to turn around to know who it was. Robert stepped into the room, his face a mask of calm, though the slight tremor in his hands betrayed his nervousness. But there was something different about him now, something that made Emma's blood run cold, a hint of desperation, a look that suggested he knew the game was over, and yet he wasn't willing to surrender. Not yet. Do you think you've won? Robert asked, his voice low and edged with something that sounded like resignation. I'm not trying to win, Emma replied, her voice steady despite the pounding of her heart. I'm just trying to stop you. Robert shook his head slowly, his eyes narrowing. You don't understand. You've just scratched the surface, Emma. You have no idea how deep this goes, how many people are involved. You can't bring it down, not by yourself. It's bigger than you, bigger than all of us. He trailed off, as if struggling to find the words to explain the depth of the system they were all a part of, and yet, he couldn't. Then maybe it's time someone took it down, Emma said, her voice unwavering. She had found the strength she needed in this moment, the strength she had been searching for all along. It wasn't just about exposing them anymore. It was about ending the cycle of manipulation, about freeing herself from the chains that had held her for so long. Before Robert could respond, the loud crash of the front door splintering echoed through the mansion. Several figures stormed inside, agents, men in suits who moved with military precision, their faces cold and unreadable. But Emma wasn't afraid anymore. She knew this was the moment everything had been leading up to. This was the endgame, and she wasn't going to let them control her any longer. The agents moved to seize Robert, but he resisted, struggling as they forced him to the ground. Emma could hear the shouting, the commotion, but her focus remained fixed on the screen in her hand. She had sent the files out. The truth was already out there, waiting to be uncovered by anyone willing to look. She had given the world a glimpse of what was hidden in the shadows. As the agents restrained Robert and MIA stepped forward, Emma felt a strange sense of calm wash over her. The fight wasn't over, not yet. There would be more battles, more struggles, but for the first time, she felt like she was in control of her own fate. For so long, they had made her feel small, powerless. But not anymore. We can still fight this, MIA said, her voice quiet but determined. There are people who are going to want to stop you, people who won't let this go. But there are others who will help. You've opened the door, Emma. Now we have to push through it. Emma nodded slowly. It wasn't over. Not by a long shot. But they had made it. They had taken the first step, and that was all that mattered. As the agents hauled Robert and the other conspirators away, Emma took a deep breath, stepping toward the door. Outside, the world seemed quiet for the first time in weeks, as if the storm that had raged around her had finally calmed. But there was still a nagging feeling deep inside her. The truth had been exposed, yes, but the world was not going to change overnight. There were still forces at work, still people hiding in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike again. As she stepped out into the cool night air, MIA by her side, Emma knew that this was only the beginning. They had exposed the lies, but the war for control was far from over. The system that had once held her in its grip was far more complex than she had ever realized, and there would be more revelations, more secrets, and more betrayals along the way. But as she looked up at the stars above, Emma felt a sense of peace settle over her. The truth was no longer a weapon held against her, it was her weapon now, and she was ready to use it. And in that moment, she knew one thing for sure: the fight was just beginning. But whatever came next, Emma was ready. But as the cold truth settled in, Emma knew one thing for certain: the clock was ticking.